This is Democracy Watch. So, Mark, Louisiana has mandated that the Ten Commandments should appear in all classrooms in the state. The state is already being sued. So we're going to go over why this is happening in a moment. But first of all, got to get this question out of the way. Is this constitutional?
No, it's not constitutional. And first of all, let me correct one thing. What they want to do is put a version of the Ten Commandments on in every classroom, a particular Christian version of the Ten Commandments. It is not the same. People who don't know this don't realize that not all versions of the Ten Commandments are the same. There is a Jewish version of the Ten Commandments. There is a version of the Ten Commandments that the Catholic Church uses. Different Protestant denominations have slightly different wording and order to these, as is the case between the Jewish version and the dominant Christian version. So this is not just the Ten Commandments. This is a Ten Commandments that is taking a theological point of view. It is not only favoring religion, it is favoring a particular version of religion. So no, it is not constitutional. It violates the Constitution in two respects. The first is a ban on the establishment of religion, which was intended to not just say that you can't discriminate between religion and non-religion, but most importantly at the time, between religious sects, right? Remember, most of the people who came to the United States initially were fleeing a dominant religious interpretation and coming here to celebrate a different religious interpretation, and this would clearly violate that. The second is the much more traditional, separation of church and state idea, the idea that the state should not be promoting religion as a whole versus non-religion. But let me say finally, and you can tell I feel very passionately about this, this is a state that doesn't educate its children, right? This is a state that is failing the children of Louisiana. This is not, number one, number two, number three in public education in the country. This is not a state that is leading in test scores in the country. And rather than spending money to improve the education that all Louisiana's children get, they are spending their money on this. They're spending their money on this because they want to promote a particular Christian national agenda, and it is going to be struck down by the courts.
This is a state that's ranked 46th in healthcare, 47th in education, 49th in economy, 49th in infrastructure, and 50th in crime. And their focus, to your exact point, should be on fixing any of these things as opposed to shoving religion down kids' throats in classrooms. But Mark, given the fact that this is nakedly unconstitutional on its face, obviously the Louisiana governor wants to get sued. He said as much to get this thing in front of the Supreme Court. Does the composition of this court worry you, even despite past Supreme Court precedent?
It terrifies me. It terrifies me. Look, we have at least one justice who has, whose spouse has flown appeal
to heaven flag?
The heaven flag.
Yeah.
And has, been caught on tape saying that she wished she could, fly other flags that are symbols of very religious perspectives. And, we have other justices who have clearly brought to the table not just a perspective of that faith brings, which is fine. Like, we're all informed by faith. I'm informed by faith. I'm informed by my faith. But who brings, I am worried that we have a number of justices who bring a particular form of Christian ideology, a particular form of Christian nationalism in some cases, to the table, and who have been looking for an opportunity to put not just permissive religion into schoolhouses, but compelled religion into schoolhouses. And let's be clear, when you start by putting a particular text of one religious denomination in classrooms, you are not being neutral towards religion. You're not saying religion is welcome in school. Look, I spent a lot of my life as a student, and I prayed every day before every exam. I prayed before the bar exam. I prayed before my English exams, my history exams, and that's great. But this is bringing into it a perspective and a state-sponsored perspective, and I am worried that the U.S. Supreme Court, when you look at its composition, may bless that for the first time.
Is there anything to suggest how the Supreme Court would rule, even given past decisions from this specific court? Like, for example, how does Kennedy versus Bremerton School District, where the coach was allowed to lead a prayer on the 50-yard line of a high school football game, how does that factor in here?
Yeah, so I think you have to look at two lines of cases. The first is there were cases that banned prayer in school. That said, actually, you cannot have a situation in which school teachers or leaders lead a prayer, even if even if students could opt out. You cannot have prayer in school. In fact, you cannot even have a moment of silence in school to encourage prayer when it's not led by a teacher. Okay, so that's one line. Then you have, you point,
real quick, was that decided by this Supreme Court?
No, I was going to say. And then you have the more recent precedent, as you point out, which involved people who want to pray in obvious ways during school proceedings. In the case of a high school coach who wanted to go to the 50-yard line and kneel and say a prayer after games, I didn't think that was rightly decided. But this would be much further than that, right? This is not like a voluntary effort by a coach to pray before or after a football game, even if it was encouraging in subtle ways others to pray with him. This is literally putting the Ten Commandments in school classrooms, right? People don't have to play football. People don't have to go to football games. And presumably, if you took the facts at face value, and I'm very dubious of it, but if you took the facts at face value with the football coach, it was still him doing it as an individual, not as a school official, and no one was forced to join. People who go to high school English class, they have to be in the English class. They have to be in the homeroom with the Ten Commandments. And so it is much, much more compelled. But I also want to get back to this point that it is a particular version of the Ten Commandments. Like the versions of the Ten Commandments, the difference between a Jewish version of the Ten Commandments that, for example, says, thou shalt not murder, and this version which says, thou shalt not kill, that is a theological difference between religions. And forcing children who have been brought up in one faith tradition to believe that the state has endorsed a different faith tradition violates the U.S. Constitution. And that would be a giant step from even where we are right now.
Okay, well, that raises the question then, what would be the implications of this potential ruling if the Supreme Court does rule in favor of the governor of Louisiana on other aspects of our society? What could also change if they do rule in favor of Louisiana?
Look, I think at this point, I think if they rule in favor of Louisiana, we should assume prayer in school, compulsory prayer in school with an opt-out is coming next. I think that there will be a requirement that, Louisiana, or pick your state, will say that teachers are to begin every class with a 30-second prayer. It might be the Lord's Prayer, a very common Christian prayer. It might be something non-denominational. But again, non-denominational doesn't mean it is agnostic between religions. It might be non-denominational, but it might offend Jehovah's Witnesses. It might offend Muslims. It might offend Jews. It might offend Hindu, right? People who are not of a non-denominational Christian faith perspective.
I would add, too, that they're going to say that you can opt out if you want to, but that's not taking into account how kids operate. I was the only Jew on my high school wrestling team. We did the Lord's Prayer before every single wrestling match. I led it half the time. If you think that you're going to tell a kid that they could just stand to the side and them not feel completely overcome with nobody wants to isolate themselves, basically. And so if you think you can just tell a kid oh, it's fine, you just opt out and you stand to the side while 99% of your classmates or teammates are doing something, you don't understand how kids work. And so you're compelling people to do something by virtue of just societal norms.
Yeah, and again, you could argue that this Ten Commandments is worse than even that because you can't step aside from something that is displayed in your classroom.
Right.
It's in your classroom.
Now, to make matters worse here, and we'll finish off with this, Louisiana's Republican governor has signed at least 9 voter suppression bills in the past few weeks. What does it say about Louisiana Republicans that these are their priorities as we head into this election?
It shows you that Christian nationalism and MAGA extremism has taken over the state of Louisiana. You have a governor who does not care to improve the lives of his citizenry. Instead, he wants to promote religion and he wants to make it harder to vote and virtue signal to Donald Trump and his Christian national supporters that he is one of them. You know, we have moved the Overton window in this country so far since 2016. You know, we in 2016 when Donald Trump was asked if he supported David Duke and he was unable to give a clear answer, that was viewed as a major faux pas and something that his campaign had to walk back. You look at who Donald Trump hangs out with now. He hangs out with white nationalists. He hangs out with racists. He hangs out with anti-Semites. And I'm not saying the governor of Louisiana is an anti-Semite or a white nationalist, but if you wanted to be, if you were looking for someone who was a white nationalist, they might do some of the same things. And so you know, it is very, very distressing that in Republican-controlled states, where honestly he doesn't need to suppress the vote, he's already winning. He doesn't need to ostracize minority communities. They already feel unwelcome. He doesn't need to send a message to women who are fighting for basic fundamental rights. They know that the state of Louisiana is not with them. And so they're piling all these things on because they want to signal to Donald Trump and his ilk that they're willing to go further and further and further, and that there really is no limit to how much they will roll back women's health, how much they will signal that only Christians are welcome, that how much they will signal to minority voters that they are not welcome to participate in the voting process. And it is a tragedy for the citizens of Louisiana that that is the governor they have.
Perfectly put. Of course, this case will absolutely be a main focus as we, head into the next Supreme Court term. Republicans, no doubt, will bring this forward, and this will have major reverberations throughout our society, depending on what happens here. So, of course, to keep on top of this case and any lawsuits, any inevitable appeals that we may see, please sign up for Democracy Docket. It's the free news outlet Marc founded to focus on everything voting in elections. You can get all of your information on this case and every other case that we're watching there. I'll put that link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.